Well, welcome everybody. For good or ill, we're going to make this the fifth session and the final one of these call it conversations about the Enneagram. And I'll do two things: give some more background, and then also uh, outline what we're trying to do in this particular last session. And I confess at the start, I'm still not quite sure how what's going to go into the third session, because it's hopefully it'll be something emergent from what we do together. So the outline of the program is that we're going to start with one of Mr. Bennett's inner exercises and go through this as an experiential thing in its definite stages. And we'll have some conversation afterwards, if we can, about how it might fit into this framework of the Enneagram, and whether knowing about that would be helpful to understanding and performing the exercise. Then we will shift to another strand in this conversation, and that is to do with this, I think, very incredible, intricate part of the Enneagram, which is sometimes can be called the three octaves. This intertwining of three processes. And this will be in relation to the homework you was set last time, I think, that is to write a life story. And I'll be so fascinated to learn what you've made of that. And because it has to be interpreted. It's not a formula. You have to get your own sense of what it might mean for your own life to have three independent strands and what they could be. And as an input to that, we're going to have recording from Michael White. He's recording. He was all set up to be here live, but then he has familial obligations which he had to fulfill, which meant that this time was taken up with helping one of his relatives. I want to push in a little bit about the background, in a sense, the argumentative political controversy is the best word, about the nature of the Enneagram and its sources. I've been writing to somebody who's going to be involved in running a seminar about the Enneagram at Claremont, and we've been having a very friendly argument about it all, because he's quite fond of the Oscar scheme of types, for the 9 types. And my background in this is, well, first of all, and particularly about that, I have a friend, some of you may know, Bruno Martin in Germany, who was also a pupil of Mr. Bennett, and he is a publisher in his own right. And it was his suggestion some years ago, I don't know how many years ago, that when there was this rise of the interest in the personality types Enneagram, I should write a book about the more traditional Gurdjieffian one, which I did. So it was actually published in German, because I had to translate it from English to German, but it was his idea. And I rather provocatively called it the intelligent Enneagram, which obviously has a subtext. A lot of the other Enneagrams are not intelligent. But you know me, I tend to be a little bit critical and so on of other people. So that set it off. And I myself, got some experience with the fixationist one, the Oscar one, and for a certain time I knew, and some of it was absolutely fascinating because it involved work on movies and biographies and photographs and all kinds of stuff. It was that time of the kind of open research, it was lovely. But then I separated from, because I felt that something really had lost by this taking over by the fixationist school, which, I mean, a lot of people in the world, they say Enneagram, and they think only of Oscar Chaucer's invention and not of Mr. Gurdjieff at all. And I think this is a shame, because my picture of what happened originally was that Gurdjieff and some of his friends, as he called it, took it upon themselves to do something which is quite almost a timeless process in the world of culture and meaning. That is to take a fresh look at what's coming from the past, from a different time periods. And usually, as is the case, I think you must find that something there which isn't, so to speak, been totally replaced by something in the present, and which still has a potential, a meaning for the present. And they took this material from, he said, from dances, from monuments, from legends, and all kinds of things. But they looked at it and thought, this is too, I don't know, wrong word I'm going to use, though, it's airy-fairy. It's too much, too abstract, too much in the wind. It's not accessible to modern people at all. So they took upon themselves this role of making it into a form accessible. And so I believe that Gurdjieff took some of the elements which they were developing, some ideas, and they're to do with the laws, particularly the law of 3 and the law of 7, and how these could be combined together into an image or model of how things work, how things work in a certain sense. And I want to emphasize this over and over again, because the theme of them was transformation, which means attainment of a higher level of being, or something like that. In other words, it's not just doing something which is external to us, like building a house, but there's something about building a soul, if we use that metaphor, which is helpful, and making something out of us, making something out of this experience. And Raj used to talk about the rivers of the thought, feeling, and sensation, and how we can, if we lean enough from these rivers and bring them together and forge this thing, it's like a transformation. So it was a very action-orientated view they had. And I claim that, I think you can read in A Search for Miraculous, there's quite an extensive explanation by Gurdjieff for how he derived the thing or the thinking that went into it. And I always felt with the Chaucer thing that it was just there, stuck. And a main dimension it missed was movement. The whole thing, Enneagram, was this sense of the circulation. And it was, as he said, it represents what the true meaning, or the possible concrete meaning, of perpetual motion. So various things like that suggested there was really some thought gone into the construction of Enneagram. And also, I will say evidently that it was constructed by Gurdjieff and his compatriots. There's not a trace of evidence of it ever appearing anywhere else, any time whatsoever. So it is an invention. And I compare this as means of helping one's understanding what's going on with it to the history of the development of the Kabbalistic tree of life, which some of you might know. And I was, or incidentally, I was quite upset, looked up some book on the Enneagram and the Kabbalah, and the Enneagram they took was the Chaucer thing. And I thought, what the hell, not? And I believe an old friend of mine, Warren Kenton, and I can't find it anymore, did a study of the Kabbalic tree of life and related it strongly to the Enneagram, but I can't find his book now anymore. But that work on the tree of life was very informative, because it went over 3 centuries. And you can see these stages, and people worked on putting elements that came from their tradition in together. And I thought this is a good model in one aspect anyway, for what could have happened with Gurdjieff and his friends. And it wasn't, for example, until after about almost 300 years that they finally put in this ingredient, the lines which connect the different places, which are 22 of them, and then they found this identification. This is the Hebrew alphabet with its tremendous meaning and potentiality in those lines. But that's one of the last additions to it. And if you look at something, that tree of life, you see many, many kind of affinities, but it's not the same in any crude way. But affinities, the threefoldness, the inner lines, the levels, and all this kind of thing, it's so similar. But of course, there's the challenge in my theory about this, because, obviously Gurdjieff and his friends did what they did in about 10 years, I suppose, whereas the tree of life took about 3 centuries to evolve. So after studying that, I want to emphasize over and all this for me, the Enneagram was this, and I've got a lot of difficulties with Gurdjieff's ideas as such, but it was just, again, I think he was a human being doing something of this time, which is done from generation to generation. You reinterpret the past for the present, and therefore do something for the future. And that's gone on all the time. And we can see how even the Greeks, before they really got going, took material from Babylonian civilization, and particularly in music and in medicine and all kinds of things, and made their own creation, their own virtue out of it. This is how it goes. And so it's not strictly, there is ancient wisdom and there's the present, but it's an ongoing process, and it's going on perpetually. And there's just add one more point about this from David Bohm. He also said that about scientific theories, the ordinary populist view is that we're up to date now. We've got the best ones because we've thrown away the old ones, which are now soon to be no good. And Bohm said, this is nonsense, these old theories and so on, they still have value and meaning. Just got to find the way in which they are meaningful, what they apply to, what they work for, what they give people to. And there's this dreadful misunderstanding about science in that respect. And he also emphasized, which I think is important in respect of be transferred to Gurdjieff's work and understanding it. And he said how science should be moving more and more towards art, and not this mechanistic kind of business which has become lately. So that's my prelude to all of this, and my appeal for this attitude of this is about things which work, but it's about attainment. It's about this miracle of what has got to come together to lift us or lift something from one world into a higher world. And it's an extraordinary dramatic story woven into this diagram. And this diagram has lots of difficulties and glitches and uncertainties, but that's reality. Now for this exercise, it is, for me, thought to be one of the most attractive exercises. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Bennett, a pupil of Gurdjieff, took from Gurdjieff the various exercises that is Gurdjieff, devised. But being a proper person, I think in this work, actually then began to create his own. This was not to deviate from Gurdjieff, but simply that one goes on on the real line, the real tradition is creative, is not repetitive, is not a reduction to a formula which you force. It's not like a dogmatic creed or anything like that. It's something quite else. So a door is opened by one person and other people come and they develop and kind of discover new things about this. So he had his way of doing it, and it was very extraordinary, as some of you will know, when he set up, we've been at Sherborne, did these exercises. There was taken to be a repertoire of about almost 100 of them, which are delivered in the course. So that was a stage, also a synthesis of all that repertoire which he had. And some of us later actually got together and put together what notes we had on them to make a kind of hate to say it, almost orthodox version. So this is one of a certain stage, and I personally have always liked this because it is a very clear uh, gives a very clear vision of a process of going from, let's simply call it the outside to the inside, but even these words outside and inside have depths of meaning and nuances which are important to get. So there is definitely a kind of progression which goes through it, and I want you to be aware of it as we go. I shall perhaps, according to the feeling of the moment, tell you when there's this kind of transition we're making, and so which might help you to structure it. But Bennett was always very strongly about this regard. He said you always have to make each of these stages completely independent of the other, to not merge them, not muddle them up in any sort of way. He's very keen on the steps being taken. Now, I have got some notes here in front of me from a particular, or from the Sherborne, one of the Sherborne versions, but it's, which I won't look at very much just to check I'm doing it right. But it's sometimes when you do an exercise, people who've done this, or most of us feel, you know, each time you do it, it's a new, maybe a new way of saying it. Because it's the different people, the different feeling, the atmosphere, and all the rest of it. I won't be completely fixed on the text which I have in front of me here. So, all right, so here goes. So we're going to do this exercise with a twofold intent here, do you know, in the sense to do the exercise, whatever doing an exercise means, and that's quite a question. But also to reflect back to the Enneagram. This will be, or it's, I will say it is, and people commenting on this exercise, and Mr. Bennett himself even have said how it follows the enneagrammatic structure. Excuse me. That it is to reveal something about this way of structure, and that's a theme which Mr. Bennett, following on from Gurdjieff, always had. You see, it's in a way this is not a way of intuition or anything like that. It's not. We think intuition is incorporated into it, but it's these definite structures. But these structures are not like, I'd say, formulas. Not do A, do B, do C, do D, and you know, then you got the jackpot. No, it's structure, because you have to combine this thing, this variety in ourselves, which was expressed in different ways, and sometimes apparently negative, like man has many eyes and all that sort of thing, but in a very positive way, in the scheme of the three centers, thinking, feeling, and moving, all pointing to these independent elements in us. And there's this orientation in it, looking for these different elements, because all are in some way needed. This is why Bennett was talking about total man, the whole man. What is the whole man? The whole man contains things which are also, how to say it, even ugly, whatever it is, you know. And there's probably has crept into the psychology, this awful nomenclature of negative emotions and so on. And I've come to the point of saying there are no emotions which are negative. It's just how we deal with them, which makes them negative or positive. And because certainly the energy of things like anger is quite an essential food. So we sit before this, and sit as comfortably as you can, with this simple criteria of being as relaxed as you can. So if you've got your arms on the chair, you know, it's really resting there. You're not holding it anyway. Don't hold anything you don't need to. and your back is supported. It can be, mine is against the back of the chair. Yours can be a little bit freer in front, as you like. And you want this, you say, to be a spine as erect and as vertical as it can be. But of course, the spine actually isn't totally vertical at all. But you get that sense of the balance of your head upon your torso and this kind of thing. And without going into too much palaver about this, it's just like, so it's lovely memory is the criterion to like the starting point. How does one begin anything? I used to give seminars devoted entirely just to that question. How do you begin? Because for me, it's a mystery, and it's to do with, well, intellectually with Bennett's idea of hypoxis and so on. But it's a very extraordinary thing. And you want to get to this kind of neutral point before you begin anything. And so it's like coming up to the blackboard and wiping it clean until you're going to write some more equations on it or words or whatever it is. So that's the general thing. Here we go. No. We begin in, and you can use the phrase from afar. And this is like it's a mental projection or orientation, which is towards all life. Just take it as it comes to you. Maybe it's vividly, maybe it's just abstractly, it doesn't matter. But what comes to you is all life. It's all life on earth, all life in the universe. It's just all life. So by saying this, we are kind of opening ourselves to possibilities. It's all life. Right, now we're going to change to step 2. And this is related to where you are situated. And may find it a little bit difficult to have to be quite inventive to realize this. What it is to become aware of what's around the room you're sitting in, or your house even. Now, I live in a small town, and I have a sort of square outside here, but it's usually a nice neighborhood, very quiet and so on. So, but if you can hear traffic, or birds, aeroplanes, people walking, anything actually happening in your immediate vicinity, and that activity going on as best you can. As I say myself, I have very little, a few distant, very distant traffic sounds, not very much at all. And if you can't get anything at all, then I invite you to just imagine it. Imagine, memories of people walking on the streets and birds singing and so on. Anything as long as you make it work. So we do that for a couple of minutes. And now we're going to come to the first critical transition. And this is based on realizing the simple fact that you are sitting in a room. And so you open your eyes and you can look around, and you might first of all think this is strange to be doing in an inner exercise, but it's connected with the claimed fact that we, we want to be conscious and awake and so on, but we're even heedless of our immediate surroundings and not realizing the significance of being here at this particular place at this time. Mr. Bennett used to add here too about, I'll come to it in a moment when we come to the body. But if you're with somebody else, you can look at them, but you look at them as an object or a pet you have. It's just everything is as a material object, just sitting there. This is, you see, this is that. There's that, and ceiling, floor, chair. And as you look around, you begin to situate yourself in this room of objects. And you become aware of this figure, almost like just not you in particular at all, it's just this body sat in the chair. It also is an object. And it's so concrete, you become aware of the clothes you're wearing, the shape your body is taking in the way it is sat and arranged. Maybe for some of you, it would be like you're actually almost constructing a painting in your mind, a realistic painting. And you're seeing it, everything from the outside. Now you come to see your own body insofar as you can. And in this, I could this uses the word situated. So you're situated, you're placed. You have a place. It's specific. And it involves very much in terms of what we can actually see around us, very much this state of matter, which is solid state of matter. Mr. Bennett used to dwell on it sometimes. He said solid matter is very rare in the universe. So become aware of this miracle of having this, being in this condition of material existence. Cosmically, it's quite extraordinary. Now, we minimize the personal element, but now we're going to go in a different direction, that is inward. See if you can get the feeling, the experience of like passing through your body, like through a membrane, to the inner sense of the body. So you're changing your perception here. And so you have to your contact with the body is we say, from within, as previously it was from without. And we call it sometimes having sensation in the body, or coming to presence in the phenomenological term. I'm sorry about noise, that's lovely. You can ignore that. So you're aware of your body as filling with something. It's gone inside it, first of all, in a kind of literal sense, and now in a kind of psychological sense. You're touching the withinness of the body. And this withinness is other dimensions than those of the withoutness of the body. But however it comes to you, mind aware of your pulse, your breathing, and so on. But just what should dominate is this inwardness in the body. And here it said you can close your eyes, which is change from the previous state. But dwell with it, deepen it. If this outro makes you simply a breathing being, but a meaning being. If breath helps too, that's fine. This is the inner life. Now you go to your breast. No need to worry about where precisely, just the feeling of your breast. And evoke the sense of I am in your breast. I'm dying to, like in ancient India, the Atman, what actually meant a little man who was in the center of the breast. I sometimes have that image which helps me, and you might find other images which help you to get this kind of centering in the chest, which carries with it this sense of I. And here, as I said, breath can help. You breathe in, you become aware of your breath, of course, now. Breathe in, and this is I. And breathe out, am. So you can get this tidal in and out, going by itself. It just deepens the meaning of I am in the breast. Now, in the next stage, concentrate your attention, bring it to the center of your breast as a point. Is the point of the needle. This point, which has no dimensions, is the entry point to a reality, a spiritual reality. But we sort of bring into this dimensionless point all your attention of this I am. Just you're poised. And you might become aware of it. So like, even though it's just a point, it's rather like standing in front of a door. Excuse me. Its point has infinite potential. So it's only you're anticipating now going through this dimensionless point that one can access what is beyond. We'll stay with that for a few moments. Mm. Mm. Now you move to another point. Take this needle and bring it out to you have in front of your attention, so to speak, the eye of the needle. And you know the phrase eye of a needle is a biblical phrase. It says that the rich man cannot enter the kingdom of heaven no more than a camel can pass through the eye of a needle. they have this needle. Now, thing is, and here, let's take advantage or whatever, like if you might feel, I don't know what this exercise is about, or I'm losing it, or whatever it is, or apparently negative things, can take it because they help to make you small. And that's the thing, you have to be so small you can pass through the eye of the needle. Ah, those of you who are religious or anything like that, you can bring it to play. And Bennett was very keen on it. He said in doing this exercise, he would often call upon Mary, Mother of God, for help. But it's each according to what you find meaningful. Mm. So literally what goes through the eye of the needle is nothing. You are going into your origin. The undiscovered country. You feel I don't know how to do this. It's not working, but turn it into an advantage. You're not knowing. You cannot do. You do not understand. This is a reflection of the nothingness. Mm. Now you leave that and go into what's called the collected state. It's where you get this sense of the wholeness of yourself and the stillness, not making any effort of attention. You're being with yourself. And finish. To leave that for the moment, and go to a slightly different theme, though obviously be in some way connected. Uh, I'll just add a little note, so to speak, which is, reflects my attitude towards this. And it is the sense of, what it means to go through different worlds or being different worlds. It's, which was very important for Mr. Bennett. He was wanted to give people a means of convincing themselves that there are these different worlds. And because it's initially obscure, it's not like, present day science or this multiverse and so on, because these are really distinctly different worlds in terms of their laws or their what's there, what the reality is. There are different kinds of realities, so to speak. And this giving this little taste of going from, say, a world of thought and so on into a spiritual world is quite remarkable. And the transition from one to the other is can perhaps give us what we need. Well, I certainly find I needed a kind of confidence that it's possible to do this. I think that's what he would have wished people to get, to get this confidence, and not by making themselves ignorant or silly or fantasizing, but just, it's a way of doing it and recognizing that perhaps we can do it without knowing, first of all. And then this gives us the chance of knowing that we can do it, or it can be done. I say we move on to a different theme, and this is the part where I shall start with you for a little while, not very long. And as I intimated at the beginning, it will deal with your effort, your homework to write your own or make notes about or think about yourself, your life story. And with the implication that one is encouraged to do this in enneagrammatic terms. What is it to tell the story of your life? I say now a few things. I'm trying to be very cautious and not present myself as an expert in giving the right answer or anything like that. This is genuinely an exploration. But it's the sense I'm looking for is you look at a life and it could be bound to think about it like, the books you can pick up, biographies or autobiographies and this kind of thing. And it's, the way it's done. And it's like, the the usual kind of novel, or the novels comes under the same kind of considerations. There's is to do with these different levels. You see this, I think, if I can use this very crude language, like the ordinary way of looking at things and these generalizations, and forgive me those, you see, those are only life, people who take things as all on the same level. And it's all mapped out in flatland, so to speak. So I'm just suggesting, and maybe I shouldn't, but I'm finding myself doing it, that, there's another reality going on besides the apparent reality of our lives. Sometimes in the literary world, sometimes this gets expressed by people who are living through a fiction. Like there's a wonderful thing by, I think it's association, oh yes, with Conrad. Well, it was about a book written by a chap who was actually, forgotten his name, an Englishman. He was very important in art, but he talked about it like a fortunate man. It was a doctor who lived in a French village, but he patterned his life on the heroes of Joseph Conrad, and who were very much man's men, so to speak. And there's a lot of people do this, in fact, and I think a lot of people do it to some degree, a little bit, but significant. You, and I can even put it this way, but I'm trying to hesitate. I'm torn because I don't want to put words in your mind, but I do want to put words in your mind at the same time. It's like you have a life which could be called fictional. It's by analogy. It's not, or imaginary. And you think, I'm suggesting to you very strongly, think about it in terms of the way people describe their lives and live their lives, You see, well, in ordinary parlance, no special meaning of words, people are also terms of living an outward life, but also an imaginary life, which might be almost in contrast with their apparent observable life. This kind of thing I'm probing away here. I don't want to make it too strong at the moment. I'm just hoping that somebody can, also in what is said, you see, it's probably the difficulty of it, partly, and the frustration is because, you can't maybe feel you can clearly distinguish out this. I use that term I did accidentally just now, the imaginary life, which is your other life, your visionary life, if you like. And I'm using all these words which that's two wrong associations. I'll restrain myself for the moment. I'll come back to it a moment when we listen to Michael. But anybody else give a comment, please? I hope you got it. Get some sense of investigating this and asking this. Said for me, it was so much bound up when I asked that question, whose life did you see? You say you write your life and you assume, I suppose, this means. There's me and I got a life and I write my own life. But I am attracted to the idea, and I call it simply, admit it, an idea of this. There's an ambiguity always in this life story about an uncertainty about who I am. I imagine I am somebody, and this has a character, and all these sort of things come into it. But there's in some way, always this lurking promise of something, and it can be taken in a literary sense. Like I say, the story. You're living a story. Everybody's living a story in a way. Because this story can have its own fuel and process. Um, you know, and it could be a very simple story, about getting married or having a job, whatever it is, but it's a sense of well, the best I can do, and I would do apologize, is this really core ambiguity, because we imagine, I speak for myself, I am somebody, and I think I have a life in a certain way, because why do I think it in a certain way? Because I've been reading biographies and hearing stories from people. There's stories which convince me I'm like this. I should have a story too. But it may be not true in the way I take it to be. Well, let's have a little break from furrowing our own brows, or maybe we will furrow them more. And it is it Peter who conducts us to Michael's talk?
I am going to attempt that, Tony. So I'll paste it into the chat. Give me 1 second.
Good morning. I want to say thanks to Daniel for making this recording this morning. I got tied up with some family affairs on Sunday, so Anthony has asked me to give a little talk about a certain aspect of Tibetan Buddhism that relates to what the session is about today. And if you hang out with the Tibetan lamas and the teachers, listen to them give their commentaries and their talks. One of their motifs that you'll eventually run into is they'll do a commentary based upon outer, inner, and secret meanings. And they'll take a text and they'll say the text has an outer meaning and an inner meaning and a secret meaning. And they'll do a commentary on the text based on that. And they'll even take it down and do a commentary on it line by line, and sometimes even word by word. And they'll base the whole commentary on an outer meaning and an inner meaning and a secret meaning. And they apply this across the board in different kinds of ways, and even in terms of biographies. And there's a whole genre in Tibetan literature of biographies. And when they do these biographies, they structure them with the outer meaning of your life and the inner meaning of your life and the secret meaning of your life. So I've gotten involved in Tibetan biographies, and I've read a bunch of them, and I've even written a couple. The first one I wrote was of my Tibetan teacher, Paul Sherab, and I did his life story called Glorious Wisdom. And then I did the life story of an Englishman named Keith Dowman, who became a translator and has written probably 35 or 40 books now on Tibetan Buddhism. And so I structured those books based upon this Tibetan system of showing the outer part of their life and the inner part of their life and the secret part of their life. So Keith Dowman has had a fascinating life, and I'll give you just a quick review of the outer part of his life. He was born in England in 1945 and in a little rural village on the coast. And in the mid 60s, he was a college student in London at the School of Economics, and the counterculture was washing through, and he was kind of a wild guy. And he hit the road and went to Paris and slept under the bridges, made his way down to Greece, got laid in the caves under the Parthenon, and ended up in Crete living with a girlfriend he called California Dreamin'. And they were living in the hippie paradise in Crete. And they kept meeting people from India, and hearing these wild, exotic stories of life in northern India. So they took off hitchhiking across land from Crete over, made their way down into northern India, where they met up with the sadhus and connected with the religious communities of the Hindus. And they figured out that if you were a pilgrim and you got on a train in India in 1966 and said you were a pilgrim, you could ride the train for free. And when you got to a town, if you went to the monastery and you said you were on a pilgrimage or you were wanting to study with a teacher, they'd give you a meal. So they had quite the adventures traveling, and would spend 9 months a year traveling and 3 months a year living on a boat on the Ganges, and had just an incredible life. And then there in northern India, they ran into the Tibetans, who had been forced into exile by the communist Chinese in the late 50s and early 60s. And there were 100,000 Tibetan refugees living in northern India and Nepal. And Keith was immediately attracted to them as soon as he found them and began to learn their language. And when he learned to speak and read Tibetan, his mission in life was solidified. He knew what he wanted to do. Immediately when he started reading Tibetan literature, he wanted to translate it. And in 1968 and 69 and 70, there wasn't much translation being done of Tibetan literature, and Keith was at the forefront of it. And so he settled into northern India, into this lifestyle of 9 months a year of travel, 3 months a year living in one place, learning Tibetan, translating. In 1970, he moved to Kathmandu, one of the most exotic places on earth at that time. Particularly, it was the end of the road. There were no roads north of Kathmandu at that time. And Kathmandu had been a melting pot for hundreds of years of different cultures who managed to live together in this valley, and temples and palaces and shrines just everywhere in Kathmandu to all these different religions, which somehow found peace with each other there in this little community. And so he lived in Kathmandu for 40 years and worked with the greatest of the Tibetan masters in exile. And in 1985, the Tibetan government decided to open the borders of Tibet for the first time in the history of Tibet, the first time ever in the history of the country. They were going to let people in, and Keith was there in Nepal, and he was watching the situation, got his visas in order, and was one of the very first wave of people able to get into Tibet when they opened the borders. In 1985, he had a visa for 3 days. They went to the border. He took his wife and kids. They crossed the border with a 3-day visa and stayed for 3 months. 3 days later, they were standing on the Patala Palace in Lhasa. It was a dream come true. This guy had been studying with these Tibetan lamas. Now he was in Tibet. And every summer for the next 10 years, he would spend the summers in Tibet, traveling, taking people into Tibet, writing books about the situation in Tibet and picking up texts. So by 1990, he had a pile of books already translated and was becoming well known. I was reading his books in rural Tennessee, living back in Jackson County, Tennessee. I was picking up Keith Dowman books and reading them and was fascinated. And the guy had a way of words and would translate into a kind of poetic English that was readable. Here, this ancient esoteric literature brought to us in modern poetic English. What a feat! So I loved this guy's writings and was reading his books. And he became a teacher. Then he went from becoming a translator to a teacher, and stepped out on the world stage. And invitations began to come forward for him to teach in Japan and Australia, then in Europe and Switzerland and Germany and Greece and Hungary, and then in America, and then in Mexico. And they really took to him in Mexico. And in 2010, he moved to Mexico, to a little community outside Mexico City called Tepoztlan. And that's a little indigenous community, and it's inside the caldera of an ancient volcano. There's a little town of 20,000 people inside this volcano, and the walls are up on the volcano on three sides, and the ground is black lava, and it's jungle. There's flowers everywhere. It's beautiful. I always had the feeling that wherever Keith Dowman goes, it's going to be an exotic, beautiful location. So that's kind of the outer life of Keith Dowman. And he's still around, still kicking. I spent a couple of weeks with him earlier this year. And his life story is called Pulling a Torch from the Sky. And so that's the outer life of Keith Dowman. Now, the inner life of Keith Dowman was, even as a child, he was intrigued by literature, and particularly by English literature of Shakespeare and the King James Bible. And just that flow of old King James English really intrigued him. And he loved the poets, and he read T.S. Eliot, and he read Yeats. And then things got wild in the 60s, and he hit the road and was hanging out on the road, and he was reading Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and all this stuff. And then he began to catch a flavor of Eastern literature and began to pick up on some of that stuff, and it was immediately intriguing to him. And so in his intellectual life, he was catching on to the poetic and literary currents of his day and the great flow of English literature, and at the same time was catching the flavor of this Eastern literature that was just being translated and brought to the West. And it was his mission in life when he got there to learn Tibetan, and he hooked up with a young Tibetan Lama who was the son of a very famous Lama. And this guy agreed to teach him to read Tibetan. And in that reading, it was not just learning the language, it was learning the Dharma. It was learning the esoteric practice of Tibetan Buddhism as you learn the language. If you learn it from the lamas, the two are tied up intimately together, and you can't separate them. So as Keith was learning to translate Tibetan, he was also learning to understand the whole system of Tibetan Buddhism and being integrated into that and learning that system. So, and then learning to translate it, and then going to the most esoteric of all the Buddhist texts. It was Buddhism is an esoteric religion. Most religions have a outer aspect and an esoteric aspect. Buddhism is one of the most esoteric, and in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism is the most esoteric aspect of that. And within Tibetan Buddhism, there's a school called Dzogchen that's the most esoteric aspect of that. So now we're getting into some really highfalutin Buddhist mysticism. And that's what attracted Keith, and that was where his inner life took him. And so then we get to his secret life. And when we look at the idea of secret, we can take secret and say there's three meanings to the word secret. There's the outer meaning of secret, the inner meaning of secret, and the secret meaning of secret. And of course, the outer meaning of secret is like, shh, don't tell anybody this. I'm going to tell you something, but don't tell anybody, So keep it a secret, And that's one of the outer meanings of secret. But then there's even another way of looking at secret, like in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot of secret knowledge. And in order to get to that knowledge, you have to be in sort of an academic system where you do certain amount of studies and certain amount of meditation, but then you have to have an initiation and an empowerment. And so there's all this secret knowledge in these books, and these books are secret, and you're not supposed to read them until you've had your initiation and your empowerment. And so you go to your Lama and you say, I'd like to study this text, and they'll set you down and in a little ceremonial event, ritually empower you and initiate you and walk you through and give you a Buddhist meditation even, and then you're ready to read the text. So that's the meaning of secret in Tibetan Buddhism, but that's the outer meaning of secret. And the inner meaning of secret is sort of like, I'm not very good at mathematics. And so if I opened a book of calculus and tried to read that calculus, I could not understand what the first word of a page of a calculus textbook. So that information is secret to me. And until I gain enough knowledge of algebra and trigonometry and geometry in order to understand calculus. Calculus is secret stuff. I just can't penetrate it because I don't have the intellectual tools and the knowledge to do it. I can do it if I wanted to learn it. I could learn trigonometry and algebra and figure out how to do some calculus. But that's secret, and that's the inner meaning of secret. And then the secret meaning of secret is the idea that there's a certain aspect of our psyche, of our knowledge, of our awareness that is non-conceptual, that we have a aspect of our being that comes from where language and concept arises from. And if we can get to that place, we're beyond words, we're outside language, we're beyond comprehension, we're in the place of silent apperception, where we see the world stripped of all of the pretense and the preconception that has built up through our language and culture and our education and our teachings, and all of that goes away, and the world stands out, bam, like in the dark of night when a lightning flash hits, and all at once you see things. And this is the foundation that our conceptual understanding of the world comes up out of, and we can get to that place. We all have it inherent in us. It's the silent foundation of our basic human nature. And that's the secret meaning of secret. And so Keith Dowman in his life penetrated into that secret and studied it his whole life and is still traveling the world presenting this kind of knowledge called Dzogchen, the Great Perfection, to students all around the world, and still translating and putting out his books. So these things, this outer, inner, and secret, this is like advanced mysticism. This is like graduate level mysticism. And the three are not separate. It's not like a hierarchy where you have the outer and inner and secret all lined up and one is better than the other, but they're all together. This is all happening simultaneously at the same time. And we have our outer life going on, what we're doing here. We have our inner life, what we're thinking and feeling, and we have this secret life of that silent homecoming to our basic human nature that we share in common with all people, and then with all life and with all things. So I'll leave it up to Anthony to show how this inner, outer, and secret relates back to the Enneagram and the topic for today. But there's a take of Tibetan Buddhism and that threefold system of outer, inner, and secret. So thank you, Anthony, for that. Thank you, Daniel, for making this recording this morning.
We could adopt an overall model for a life story of a certain kind, which would make it parts of this easier work with, which is to say, you could have a basic mythical story with a person going up in various cultures, so to speak, and it reaches the point at which something happens, and then they see there is another kind of life to live. And I don't know if some of you have felt that. I did myself, which led to certain consequences. And then one has a period or a functioning in which there is sometimes even a conflict, difficulty with this sustaining an inner life of any kind, of developing it over time. Then it leaves open the question about the third octave, or I put it in the Enneagram language, and it's always an evocative, there's always an evocative character about the third, and I'm always cautious about trying to pin it down and label it in any particular way, simply because in each there's something so incredibly intimate about it, especially in a life. We have in the West, we tend to use the word for the secret. Well, sometimes, there's all these variations, of course, and that is that it's like associated with the word like destiny. And the question comes up, of course, when I was writing our life stories now, when we're not dead, there's always this kind of option to have I fulfilled my destiny, the reason why I'm on this planet, and all this kind of thing can arise, which are usually questions which we shy away from. But I say it's a kind of standard plot, like a Hollywood plot or something, but put in its more esoteric terms. So the thing which has always touched me, not strongly at times, but a little bit, has been this sense of what's my inner life works in, well, let me be simplistic and say sometimes in mysterious ways. The inexplicable in our lives, the coincidences, the meetings with the strange person. And sometimes in the literature you can find it. I refer to literature because it is an influence. It's the world of fiction, imagination, however you do it, through the movies or through intensive studies of some kind, academic kind. It's all this side of this imaginative element in one's life. This outer, what actually happens? You do that. You go travel from A to B. You get married to this person or that person. You earn a living that way or the other way. You migrate to so and so, and then you get ill or you break a leg or whatever it is, and all these kinds of things go on. And you can, I think, ask the question, what is really going on? One of the influences on me has been Orage, because I don't know if many of you realize that Orage, is one of the key man which Gurdjieff had in the United States in a certain period, and who helped him in the initial editions of Beelzebub's Tales. And without Orage, it would have been a different book. And he was always with his own people. He had a great influence himself on literature. He was a renowned critic and editor, incredibly widely read and renowned throughout the world for his mastery of the English literature in particular, though he could read things like the Mahabharata completely I think in Sanskrit. This has an influence in that what he did with his people, actually influenced literature and this whole theme about autobiography. The autobiography, which I really asked you to do, is incredibly challenging. Again, I'm going to use very naive and simplistic language for this, I say, because you have the thing about, can you speak the truth about yourself? Nobody really gave an articulate comment on that, You sit in front of your life, and the ordinary, again, I'm using crude term, the ordinary view of this is, of course, I can tell you the story, what happened, and so on and so on, this happened. And in terms of telling the truth, it is always in terms of did I go there or not there, or, these factual things in terms of fact. But no, there's another kind of truth which is of value because there is an aspect of revelation to know oneself. After all, this is the great instruction from the Delphic oracle to Socrates. Know thyself. This is a theme was taken a certain shape in the Western cultures, and when it's always affected by one's culture, because how to do that, how to know oneself, but also how to speak truth I know. You may have had experiences like this. I know I had a certain time with a guru I really didn't like at all, but he's very influential on me. And this whole thing was to speak the truth from the heart. Can you speak the truth? You know, and even I myself feel very kind of dubious about John Bennett's biography, A Witness, where he's attempting to do this. But I think it's not easy. It's not really hard. It's hard to be authentic. Then I had another little second-hand story about this, and my friend Simon Waveman, he talked to me once, oh, actually, it was a few years before he died, and he talked about meeting his spiritual self and having a conversation with his spiritual self who would tell him about various things, including when he was going to die and what he would do in life and all the rest of it. You know, you don't have to have exactly that same sort of thing, but there's an issue. What's going on? You see, one's life is also not just a matter of where you are and what job you get, but it's to do with what we call this inner life. And that has a different logic entirely. It's not in time in the same way. It's has an element of a hidden scriptwriter telling the story, which in a sense can be treated, again, I don't want to be dogmatic about this, and be treated as just, well, one part of one's own internal wiseacring, imagination, fantasy, wishful thinking and all the rest of it. But it has another possibility, which is that it is the real story, and the outer story is just a shadow of it. Why do I go here? Why do I go there? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? Do I have to be in a certain place at a certain time? All this is all to do with the inner life. And one of the standard forms it takes place as is in coincidences in one's life. Sometimes, like, as I believe, where we talk about Joseph Aziz, who's became very interested in the life of Mr. Bennett and has written about a story about him and so on, which actually features as its main thread the visions that Bennett had throughout his life. And these were his evident contact with the inner worlds or higher worlds, whatever it is. So we don't have to puff oneself, imagine we're sort of spiritual saints or anything like this, but sure, there is this appeal, and it's in a way I was making by setting this homework, an appeal to say, look at yourselves as not just stereotyped characters in a soap opera doing this, that, and the other, not as something you reduce to a CV, a curriculum vitae, which you set out your merits or life experiences or so on. There's something else. And I was hoping so much that you would get really tantalized by yourselves, because this is writing the life story, you see, can be taken to be a form of remembering yourself. It's not, it has this virtue or limitation of just being an articulate external statement and words and so on, but of bringing one in contact with this. People do this as best they can. The people, they're thinking, well, what should I have inscribed on my tombstone? That's the sort of question I ask. Other kinds of allied questions, though. Who was the most important person I met? And how did I ever find out anything like what I should be doing? Who told me what I should be doing? All these questions, you see, this is incredible field of investigation. And you look, well, unfortunately, most things you can read, like I read pulp fiction, trash novels, detective stories, and so on. I mean, its portrayal of human life, which is in it, is appalling. It's absolutely so much how to say, unreality in the standard novel. And you have to go to someone like Thomas Mann to get something with some guts in it, some content in it. Because it's not why, if you at all believe in what you've been reading books about or hearing people lecture about or whatever it is, it might also include what you've actually really felt in yourself about, you know. See, it's this Gurdjieffian thing, man. If he works on himself, can live in 2 worlds and maybe even 3 worlds. And this is the thing. So I hope you got something from this and can reflect on it. You see, this is the thing, you know. And myself, I'm maybe in the minority, so I value so much language and words and so on. People say, oh, words are so limited. I can't express myself in words. And I say baloney to that. Baloney, baloney, baloney. You know, what you cannot say, you cannot know. And you can face yourself as, can I know what my life is about? And you give it your best shot. You don't have to do it like anybody else does, but you've got to give it a shot. And maybe you don't discover it. You have no inner life. You are completely empty. Maybe you discover you have a sacred life. Maybe you discover you're like one of Irishar's 30,000 unconscious saints who keep the world in existence. It's the mystery. Yeah. Every one of us, the mystery. Those we need poetry and songs to evoke this life. It's not just, as I say, a newspaper article about ourselves, a bit of shoddy journalism. Not that at all. So that's my over rant. See, but we beg you, you know, to entertain these. You can do them, but you've got to find out how to do them. And you don't have to do it like anybody else, but you've got to really do something in this. And I know my own little life, whatever it is, you know, I use a phrase, little life, I want to apologize and something, but no. I say, you've been reading about, presumably, these other worlds and all those other things. Well, bloody hell, let's get cracking in them. Take it on board. In contact with this other kind of seeing which is in you all the time, which is working in you. Try and round it off by reference to exercises, such as the thing is you go into these exercises which have been designed by people and either individually or in certain communities or traditions, shaped out of the material of whatever it is which makes us human. Until anything, this will help us develop. But I also think of it more in terms of catching up with what's already going on in us, you see, because we imagine the exercise, the eye of the needle. It's very special, it's very contrived, it's a beautiful construct. It's a work of art in its own right. And he would, it's us all the time. You see, this, you say, put it like this, it's a crude way, very daft, but it's the best I can do. You say, your whole life is nothing but an exercise. See, what then? So the images, the patterns of thinking which come upon us when we undertake any task, such as we assume we can do, or we assume we can't do, either way is true, like this writing a story of one's life, puts you on the spot if you really want to do it. So that's what, for me, is the gutsy underlying feel of the fourth way, when it's something's really working in it. It's not just a little bullshit like most things. It's like you start taking things for real. You don't do this as good as say what other people do. You know, this, they go through the motions of churning out stuff. And then you talk, there are clever people and not so clever people and all that nonsense. It's just total nonsense. Until here and now we find ourselves, and we, for ourselves, each of us is a miracle. An absolute bloody fucking miracle. It's wasted. We never take it seriously enough. All right, so I'll leave it there. And to end with the final thing has come to our 2-hour part. I was going to talk a bit more about the thing about the Enneagram. I'm faced after these sessions with the task of still finishing my new book about the Enneagram. I want to encourage people to get into the sense of, which rumor Earth came up with these, but you want to see God, get into the workshop. Stop pissing around in the shop front, gazing in the shop front window. Get into the workshop. How do you get into the workshop? Okay, everyone can do it, you know, and that's the story. The real, well, real in quotation marks, question mark, I don't know. You feel you don't know? I don't know. But you can somehow decide to know. And it's not a matter of pretending or fantasy, which is what happens anyway in life. That's going on all the time. But when you say you actually decide to know, then you are in some measure saved from the ordinary fantasizing and delusions which are common for all men and women at this time. And you have to wake up. So you can't wake up until you have found your story, the story which is being written. And like we're writing itself, you can see it as an action in your very being, which can transform you. Okay, you're not very good with words, so you find some other way. Draw it, or sing it, dance it, whatever. Seize it, not this. You know, you must feel it. That's why you're struggling with all these funny ideas and practices and all the rest of it. You know, the world outside is so stupid and so insane. And there's nobody actually really does anything. The doing is a matter of engaging, being serious, taking it on. It's an act of will. Even, especially if you don't have will, hooray. Then an act of will makes you have will. It's always this chance to tell story. And you sometimes, I'm just hearing myself now and say, give me a sense, a little touch of, wow, you'd watch a movie or go to a Shakespeare play or get suddenly struck by a poem, because this is a manifestation of a truth in which to some degree we can share. That you don't have to read many books, but it's like that lovely saying, and I'll start trying to wrap this up now. The famous aphorisms of Gurdjieff: to know means to know all. Not to know all means not to know. In order to know all, it is only necessary to know a little. But in order to know this little, it is first necessary to know pretty much. I mean, it's an aphorism of pure genius. But it's genius in the sense of the saying ascribed to Goethe, which I don't think, but somebody made it up at some time. I think Goethe actually said it. It's like, only that is true which everyone knows. And strange sayings like that. It's unexpected, isn't it? It's unexpected. So I'm going to come this fact about the Enneagram, which so I do appreciate the kind of literary start of Oscar Chaucer's 9 Tugs and all the rest of it. But it's obscure answers. It's navel gazing, is not missing out this side of engaging in the world of nature around us, but it also includes the human creativity. It's all left out of that. And with Gurdjieff, you get certainly a man who could roll his sleeves up, who knew things about stone and metal and pottery and fabrications and mending things and creating things and carpet weaving, whatever it was. And then of dancing and of music. This world of this creative world he lived in, which was so intense, so amazing. And the world of positive imagination, all the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. So it's obvious where I'm going on this, but you can feel it, take the risk. It's taking the risk and you something almost you try to say things. I don't know if you ever had this. I get it, and I try to think. I can't. It's like I can't. It's like I'm throttled. You see, it's we've got to have these Gurdjieff elements. Have aim. And it's got to be an articulate aim. It's not just an aim, I want to feel better or something. I don't know, feel good or all these kinds of stuff which people go by. I want an experience. It's like the experience of being awake and so on is not the true being awake. Experience can get in your way. Experience is limiting. You've got to see through experience. But also only by involving myself in creating experiences for yourself, not buying them or indulging in them, blah, blah, blah. So, but one of his things was, of course, the movements. And he always said that weren't necessary in his way to do his movements in order to understand the Enneagram. And I reflected on this sort of past month, and I'm thinking, in a way, I want to suggest to you that my little thing I suggested in one of the sessions was to draw the Enneagram yourself is a way of doing the movements of the Enneagram. Because I think maybe Leslie will know this very well, but why? Because you've got to get this gesture, this language of gesture, as Bennett said, is the language of the will. You've got to do, even that you can make this act of drawing so genuine that it teaches you. And this is the thing, to do all these, whatever you do it in a way which teaches you. That's the sort of thing for me. But definitely, more or less, if you can't do it in the present conditions, or like me, I'm a geriatric, I can't do it without pain. I fall over and this kind of thing. It really hurts me. I can't do them in that sense. I have to study them more and do all the rest of it. But it's marvelous to see that side of things and how Gurdjieff gave us the stuff about the actuality, the reality of doing something. And of course, one doesn't understand it or get with it, or you can't give a lecture on it, but you can actually put yourself in there and into a realm where you feel yourself naked and you don't have anything to say, you don't know what to do. But anyway, enough of that, which I rant about a lot. I want to do this now, Peter. Sorry, I couldn't hear the sound. We ought to have tested it before, but anyway, we probably our next series will be on the theme of all and everything. I hope you will join us when that series starts up. Thank you for, as I say, thank you for listening, and good night and God bless.